I've been following Bill's work wherever I could see it in town for quite a while. I've always loved his work, and I don't remember how long ago I actually met you.
Either do I, but it's got to be 20 years anyway.
Maybe it is.
Yeah,
maybe
I
it
think
is. And I would come into Pegasus Gallery and look around and chat with him a little bit. And but every time I had the opportunity to see his work, I went for it because I just love his painting. And then when I started painting about 4 years ago, after moving from ceramics, from three-dimensional to two-dimensional, I knew I needed a teacher, I needed a mentor to help me. And then I thought, wow, Bill Shumway, I wonder if Bill Shumway is available to be my mentor. And I approached him.
And I just happened to be recovering from a femoral artery operation and didn't know how to function as a lumbering about old man. And when she came and asked me, I was so grateful. I was out painting in my studio, which is on stilts in the middle of the woods, or it used to be. I've moved since then. And when she first asked me, I said, I don't think I can help you. I thought she was just this really wonderful, sophisticated artist, and I didn't really have anything to offer to somebody of that caliber. And so, but she was asking, and she sounded genuine. And she was talking about using color and hinting at things that she didn't quite understand about painting. So it worked out well. I needed her, she needed me. Perhaps you didn't know that I needed you at the time. Mm-hmm. So I invited her right in. I think we started painting right away. The painting over in the corner, which is I wanted her to understand that it was important to get back to a really rudimentary place with her understanding of what painting is. So I handed her a brush, and I picked up some paint on my brush and put some on there, and I said, now that's going to ask you a question, you answer it. And then she answered it, and then I answered her question, and then she answered my question. And when we ran out of questions, the painting was done. And that was the definition of painting in its stripped down form. I think that's what we've been following since then, pretty much. Yeah, I do that because people come to me or come to the classes that I teach with preformed ideas about what painting is. And the reason they're having trouble is not because they can't paint. It's because the definition that they're holding up as a guidepost is not something that's real to them. It's a bit of misinformation. Some people think that painting is the ability to represent something really well, almost photographically. And some people think that painting is something deeply emotional and has to emit some powerful emotional statement. Those are sort of two ends of, and everything in between. Or they zonked on something when they went to a museum and they thought, oh wow, de Kooning is the master. So now I have to go paint like de Kooning or Renoir or Rembrandt. And you have to find your own way. You have to know your own language and express it from there. And so going back to the rudimentary elements of painting, which is what I just described, demystifies it. You don't have to perform in a way that does not belong to you.
I'm always surprised by what Bill comes up with in our collaborations. It's thrilling for me to sit and watch when he approaches the canvas and he puts paint down and he chooses colors, because he's so bold and he takes so many risks. and he's so free. And he, in one of our paintings, I guess I started it, and then he pulled out this acid green straight out of the tube, and my gut reaction was, oh no, not that green, I hate that green. And he just put a huge swath of it across the painting. And I sat there and I just was a little uncomfortable. Then I started to see that this could work. This was interesting. This was a really risky thing to do. And it pushed my comfort zone, it pushed my boundary. And then when I approached the canvas, I was trying to work with that green. I was trying to respond to it, to make it okay, and love the fact that I was being tested in a way. So yeah, we do, I think we do surprise each other. And sometimes it's one little red line that one of us will put
Makes
down.
all the difference.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. Whoa, that little red line, oh my God.
Reminds me of a William Carlos Williams poem about the red wheelbarrow. Same thing. Yeah, the notions of terminology and elements of painting are very similar to those in poetry and music, and we often refer to them. We started painting together early on, responding to poetry, partly because why don't we get into a show with some of our collaborations? So some of those early ones were responses to Terry Thomas's poetry, and we both weren't sold on the idea of the poems so much, but we liked the idea of having a singular direction from two people, I think, and that works. And since then, we've responded to poetry many times on our own, and I've been doing that since the time I started painting when I was 8 years old.
We start the paintings together, and then we usually painting in my studio. Recently, it's always been in my studio.
Her studio's big and well lit,
yeah, it's comfortable.
but it's just as cold as mine.
Yeah, it is. It's cold. And then sometimes Bill will take the painting home, and he'll work on it and finish it. There's a few that he took home and finished, and then I saw it when he brought it back, and just thought, yep, that's it.
Or I bring it back, and then she works on it independently, and sometimes we'll just keep going back. And the definition of doneness is when there are no more questions to either of us. That doesn't mean that 10 years from now we might change our minds, and wherever it ended up in somebody's living room, we might creep in there. And I've learned that the axiom of enabling the student to get out of their own way when it comes to expressing themselves. We all have so many blocks in us, thinking we have to go this way because that's the way we've been trained, or that's the way we think it's correct, or whatever. But really, if you just step aside and let your spirit come through, it'll do it all by itself. And the same thing is true, I think, with teaching. Getting out of the student's way as soon as you can. The last painting I did for the show is called Mentor's Prayer, and I don't think you had seen it till it came here, because it was literally the last painting I did before the show opened, and it occurred to me that I had not said anything non-verbally for the show that addressed the whole concept of mentor-student. And so that's what the painting is about. And I told Leslie after she saw it, every time I come to her studio, I ask for God's help in doing and saying the things that Leslie needs to move along. And that includes not being intrusive when she's obviously flying on her own wings. Yes, Leslie's taught me a great deal. Leslie, I think she's probably not we had this conversation not too long ago, and I think you were kind of surprised to hear me say that I learned a great deal from her. But if you look around the show, you'll see a lot of change that has happened if you pay attention to dates or anything. From the time that I met and started working with you on this series of paintings, my trust in myself blossomed. Part of it was because I'm in retirement and never experienced just painting as a thing that one does in life. I always wanted to, but I always had to make money. And so I either taught, or I ran galleries, or I was a framer, or I did endless numbers of things. And so this is a sweet moment for me where, and part of what she offered in her quest for help from me was for me to open up my can of beans. I didn't realize that I had as much trust in myself as a painter or a teacher until this experience. I think that's the biggest offering.
My.
Thank you.
I love hearing that, my God. Because I've just been taking the gifts of Bill's teaching and Bill's awareness and Bill's knowledge and his love and passion for painting. And I've just been absorbing it, so I'm really happy to know that it's going both ways.
Yeah, I think we talked about this also, and that was that I've taught all my life in various formats in college and mostly workshops. Those are the ones I enjoy the most because I don't like repeating myself. And so this experience has been the most open-ended teaching experience I've ever had, where I can teach in the same manner that I paint. I just throw myself towards whatever truth I can find in the predicament we're in at any moment, and trust that we'll get there, not knowing at all what my words are going to be. And one day I noticed she's taking copious notes all the time. I've never had anybody do that. And at first it freaked me out, but then I thought, oh my God, you mean I actually have something to offer as a teacher? I mean, that's basically it.
Yeah.
It was amazing to find that place where you were allowed that kind of freedom to teach. I've been doing that. I've been changing my point of view, my subject matter, my procedure, my materials, all my life. I think of it as this big wheel in the cosmos, and you can get stuck in patterns and addictions to materials and processes, and then start feeling enslaved by those things. So I initially started as a European trained artist, except that I did most of the training. It was mostly self-training, because I started when I was 8 years old, and I just went around from mentor to mentor. Whoever would teach me anything, I would just grab hold of their leg and hang on until I knew it was time to let go. So I had, 4 or 5 mentors, including the proverbial Sunday painter. Literally, on Sunday was the only day that I ever met this guy. I would be going to church, because that's what my family expected me to do. I was probably 7, 8 years old. And this guy, I passed by his house, and he's up there on his porch painting. Mm-hmm. He's a Sunday painter. And all I could see was his canvas and his hand with the brush in it. And I would just stand there like pre-drooling. And then one day, I don't know how many times I went by, maybe 15 times, he looks around the corner and he says, "Want to come up here and see what I'm doing?" I just thought I had died and gone to heaven. He brought me up there and he said, "Here, put a brush in my hand, put some paint on there, let's see what happens." And then the next Sunday, he had a set of oil paints and brush and a canvas for me. And he said, "Just get going." And that's the last time I saw him. It was wonderful.
My God.
And then another time I was at the at one of the clubs where young people play basketball and stuff. And this guy came in and he had a work box with paintbrushes and cans and all kinds of stuff. And he walked by, and I was dribbling with my team, and I just went, and the ball went off, and I followed him. And it turns out he was a muralist who was going to paint something on the wall. So he stood up. I'm standing there, just dazed, and he turns around, same thing. "You want to help me?" "I do. I want to help you." So he set me to work, and then he started giving me watercolor lessons. So it's from those things that I was motivated to teach as many people as I could, especially young people, because there's that time period between, 8 and 16, where young people are struggling to figure out what their voice is, and how can they express it. And a lot of artists fail in that time period because they're being pushed to be verbal and whatever, and they're nonverbal people. They've got a great deal to offer. So from the get-go, when I opened galleries, if parents brought in things that their children did, I would just tell them that they were wonderful, that they were masterpieces, and if they would take care of that condition by helping them, not necessarily doing anything but giving them good supplies. If you're doing watercolor, you want to do it on really good paper. Then you're going to get a good response. But what happens in school is they give you awful stuff, and the results are terrible, and it turns people away, turns them off. So this big wheel I was talking about in the cosmos is if something gets stagnated and you stop feeling growth happening, and your evolution is just coming to a stand, then the trick is change some element on the wheel, and it'll change the weight of the wheel and start it moving again. So sometimes you have to change 3 things. Sometimes you have to change everything. But it's always the willingness to change something that will get the wheel moving again and get your enthusiasm going again.
Your story reminded me when I was 16 and I met my ceramics teacher, the woman who was responsible for me being an artist.
Your guru.
Yeah, my guru,
Yes.
who just passed away last year at 91. She remained my dear friend and mentor for my whole life and her whole life. But I was 16 and she was teaching pottery, throwing pottery on the wheel, of which she was a master. Her name was Esther James. And she had the class there, and in one hand she had a ball of clay, and in the other hand she had a thrown pot. And she said to this class of 16 years olds, "So what happens between this and this? What's the link between this and this?" And like at 16, I mean, there were no words, but it was like a question that I've lived with my whole life. You know, even now if I throw a pot and see, yeah, a few minutes ago that was a lump of clay, and now it's this bowl. And what made that change happen? And it's such a rich story. There's so much that goes on. Yeah. And that influences my teaching, because it's the magic of having the students feel the thrill of creating, working with their hands, and seeing what arrives, and trusting it, and then being validated for what they create, and so that they validate what they've made, and that they're validated as people for what they've done, which nobody else can do. Their work is totally unique, and I love being able to encourage that. Well, I want to keep this process going. I want to keep painting with Bill. I think we're going to, and just pushing the boundaries, pushing the edges farther. I think it'd be fun to do a big painting, to work together on a large painting.
Yeah.
I'd like to have another show together. And I plan to sit here and just absorb Bill's work, which I haven't yet spent enough time looking at, and have the qualities of his work just sort of enter my unconscious, the way nature does, you know, the way the things that I love looking at just sort of fills this well. I want to just keep absorbing Bill's work and having even more of the freedom that you have, that you live internally, have that come out in my work, and yeah, just continue that flow.
Yeah, some of the things that are important from this point on are to continue some sort of painting relationship, I think, but let it broaden into whatever areas that we're interested in. I am very interested right now in nonverbal haiku painting. So based on 5-beat, 7-beat, 5-beat concept, 5 brushstrokes, 7 brushstrokes, 5 brushstrokes. There are some examples in this show of that. What initially brought me to it was that I noticed as time went on that if I could get a major portion of the composition down in 1 or 2 strokes in any painting that I do, I had a better chance of success in carrying it all the way through, because you're truly in the moment. And when you compress your action into a few strokes, something happens internally. There's a much larger consciousness that blooms inside about what you're doing, what kind of a statement am I trying to make, and what are the potential directions of that particular statement. And when you confine something, I've heard prisoners in jail talk about this often, is they felt at a certain point, not right away necessarily, they feel much freer in containment, or like a teenager when they're really, their hormones are going all over the place, and you're searching for ways of expressing yourself and doing things, and they're looking for parental control. And it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing for the parent to remember in the chaos, that what their best job is to give them parameters and hold them to it. And I feel when I'm painting like 2 people. I'm the guy who's been painting all his life, who knows a great deal about painting, and I'm also the teenager who wants to get out there and kick ass and want to do more crazy things, and find out how wonderful everything is, always.